Managers of Reddit. What's the stupidest thing you've had to fire someone for? One of the security guys at my company was caught pleasure himself on adult film during the day at the main reception desk by a female PA. When we had his exit interview, we asked him why he did it, and he just said he felt really comfortable at work and got carried away while browsing Reddit. He'd been with the company for years. The best part was a colleague of mine who came back from vacation a week later and asked what happened to Ron. Someone said he was fired, and immediately the guy said, "Oh, what? Did he get caught pleasure himself?" But he didn't even know. He just got the vibe that Ron would be the type to pleasure himself at work. Story 2. One of my technicians used our remote software to start typing to a girl whose machine he took control of. He opened Notepad, wrote, "What up, idiot?" and then went to dirty sites. Supervisor gets an email about harassment the same day and he's gone the next morning. Story 3. Oh, I'm so excited to share. I had an 18-year-old employee go to Vegas for a long weekend. He had been late a few times before and had been warned that continued tardiness would result in disciplinary action. So this Einstein is headed back from Vegas with his buddy after they both blew all their money, and they realize that they don't have enough gas to make it back. He really doesn't want to be late. Already, you are probably thinking of the multitude of options available to these two fine, upstanding citizens. They could call saying they were in a jam, they could beg for $20 and see if anyone took pity on them, or they could steal some gas. They chose none of these options. The two of them decided the best option was to take a handgun from their trunk, go into a gas station, hold it up, and demand exactly $20. They then drove 1 mile down the road to the next gas station where they filled up, paid, and were surrounded by the police as they were attempting to pull back onto the road. When I first heard what happened, I was sure the story must be exaggerated or wrong. I knew the kid wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I never dreamed anyone could do something so amazingly idiotic. It still boggles my mind. Story 4. I once worked in a retail store where we all had our own access codes that allowed us to do stuff. And if our code didn't allow us to do it, we weren't supposed to be doing it. On his first day during training, he managed to catch the general manager's code as he was typing it in and used it for about a week. Pretty much gave away thousands of dollars of equipment in the manager's name. It was particularly stupid because he did it, because he still had his trainee position, which required somebody to look over most of what he did if he wanted to give discounts, etc. If he had waited another couple of days, he would have been moved up to full staff member and could have given out most of those discounts anyway without anybody noticing or caring. He just couldn't wait to give his friends all the free swag. Story 5. Employee wrote a hole on the bottom of a customer's oil filter. Customer decided to change his oil one day. Something fired. At the time, employees were required to sign their initials for Upper Bay and Lower Bay with the date. The Upper Bay tech signed JJ, and the Lower Bay tech was Az. JJ was pissed at Az that day and finished the Lower Bay's initials with Shoal beside it and handed it to him to install. Customer found it a month later doing his own oil change and brought the filter. Employee admitted it and was terminated from above. Still friends to this day, and he is now a teacher. Story 6. In high school, a guy I knew stole a giant Ronald McDonald made of Legos from the McDonald's. It was one of those guess the number of pieces contest. He got away with it. But later on, he was busted for stealing boxes of hash brown wrappers with Monopoly game pieces on them. Cops show up at his place to arrest him over the hash browns. Lo and behold, there sits Ronald in the middle of his room. Story 7. A concessions attendant gave a pot brownie to my 75-year-old door person at my movie theater. She didn't press charges, but he had to go. No paperwork on it either. I had him resign. She, the door person, didn't know what was wrong. A friend of hers visited that evening and figured it out. She told me the next day. I was off the day it happened. He, concessions, didn't deny anything. Actually, thought what he did was 100% okay. Completely disconnected from what could have happened. Actually asked for his job back a few years later. He apologized after going to rehab. I'm pretty sure the guy still smokes. Just a guess. I haven't spoken to either of them in ages. The theater was in Northern California. That's as close as I want to identify it. This was a long time ago, and we worked it out with every party's agreement. I'm happy, and I'm fairly certain that they are too. Story 8. I was the manager of a Papa John's, and a lady called and complained about a driver going too fast near her kids. Driver comes back, and I say, "Pat, a lady called. Try and slow it down a bit." He goes postal in front of a packed audience of pickup customers. "Damn you, man. Whose side you on?" "Not mad, Pat. Just be careful." "Nah, damn it. She's lying." "Pat, dude. Not mad. Just be careful." "Ah, no. Damn that. You and I need to go outside." "Calm down, dude. Not mad at you. Don't worry." "Damn you. Babble, babble. You're done, man. Go home." Pat's a nurse now. Story 9. I was an editor on my college's student daily newspaper. We had a photography staff that would photograph events, sports games, etc. But they'd also sometimes have to do stupid stock photo type things for feature or trend articles. Think like a photo of someone filling out a college application for a story on college admissions. Anyway, we had two photogs who were apparently in a group of friends that had formed some kind of snake cult. Probably had another name that they used, but we called it the snake cult when we found out about it. The way we found out about it was that we started noticing this weird symbol in the background of some of our feature article photographs, on a post-it note in the background of a shot of some library books, or in the shape of the food in a photo of some dining hall food for an article about meal plans. Once we discovered it, we looked back and saw it had been going on for months. So, yeah, we had to fire some photogs for slipping cult symbols into our student paper on a regular basis. Story 10. This actually just happened. Our supplier came out onto my construction site and cooked everyone a free Barbie. This one bloke had a meltdown and almost had a fight with the chef. Their conversation started off like this. Guy, where's the butter? Ain't got no butter, mate. Guy, what kind of Barbie is this without any? Chef, a free one. If you don't like it, don't have it. Then the guy blew up, yelling at the chef for making smart-ass comments and swearing his head off, while the chef thought nothing of it and remained really calm and telling the guy to take it easy. Our site does not tolerate this kind of behavior. Needless to say, we kicked the guy off site ASAP, lost a job over a free Barbie and butter. Turns out there was butter in the fridge. Story 11. I was the assistant manager at a store that had an actual time clock and a point system. For those of you that don't know, a point system is basically just a magnet for turnover. 1 minute late, and you get a point the same as if you are 30 minutes late. Call in sick, you get 2 points. If I didn't log it at least 30 minutes prior to your shift. No call, no show, and you get 4 points. It took 8 points to get fired at this particular company, and the points were logged at headquarters, not at the facility. I had a single mother. Dad bailed when she was pregnant. That worked for me, and she was the best damn employee any human could ask for. She worked hard, stayed late if it was needed, picked up extra shifts from coworkers that wanted off, and more importantly, she was damn good at her job. Well, her son got sick on her way to take him to the babysitter one day. He projectile vomited blood all over backseat. I saw the car, and it looked like a scene from a horror movie. Needless to say, she didn't call in, she panicked and took him to the hospital. Boom, she had 4 points. Over the next 2 weeks, he was in the hospital and had random tests. The boy was 4. So when those tests randomly popped up, she would call in to be with him instead of having the grandmother watch him while she was at work. Twice those tests were announced while she was on her way to work, so she had to call in, and I understood why she did. I am a father. I didn't mind working the long shifts to cover her absence. No decent human would have. I received a call the day after her second call-in while the child was being tested, and corporate made my heart sink. I had to fire this woman whose son was in the hospital, possibly dying, and I had to tell her that she was no longer employed. I spent over 5 hours arguing on her behalf to corporate, but it was to no avail. She came in the next day. I fired her like I was supposed to, and I immediately quit my job without notice. Story 12. We worked at a place that bought and used cell phones. She bought a cell phone from a guy and his Facebook was still open. She posted as the guy on his Facebook something like, "I'm a big damn idiot." Guy came back to complain. She was fired. Story 13. I had to fire this kid from a gas station I worked at after he asked me if I ever poked holes in the condoms with a pushpin as he proceeded to punch holes in condoms. I have no idea how long he was doing it, for he worked there for over a year. Story 14. Receptionist who forgot to wear pants. I was at a satellite office and had 4 employees call me separately to let me know. There were some previous issues, plus they were pretty sure she was on something. Story 15. One of my cooks asked for a smoke break, told him to go for it. He hadn't come back after 10 minutes, so I looked out the window. He was smoking a substance. He came back in, started cooking some food, turned to me, and said, "I don't feel so good. I think I need to go home." "Yeah, Reggie. Maybe it's because you just smoked substances by the dumpster. Get out." "Nah, man, I can still prep." I then spent 5 minutes explaining to him why I couldn't have a substances using a giant cheese knife. To this day, I don't think he still understands why he was fired. We worked at this sort of pasta, Asian hybrid place that failed. And like many have pointed out, sub-sentences were used by the kitchen staff. My only rules were, don't do anything on the clock and don't do it in uniform. Reggie had screwed up a few times. I hated letting him go because he actually was a good line cook. The guy found another cook job pretty quickly. Story 16. I was managing a restaurant and did morning cash out. I checked all slips against the information in the computer. I noticed a new hire had really good tip averages the day before when I had been paying her out. The next day I was going through her slips and noticed a discrepancy, mainly that she had added a 1 in front of each tip and changed the total. How could I tell, you ask? She used different color ink. She was fired and we refunded the money. Seriously, at least use the same color ink. Story 17. Worked at a nightclub. One of the workers called in sick, but he was actually going to some party instead. Could you guess where they went after the party? Yes, to our nightclub. Story 18. I had a manager steal a bag that a customer had left on the counter. He completely denied it too, and I believed him. but the customer was sure he left it there and asked to see the video. I hadn't seen anything odd, so I showed it to him. He pointed out the bag, which we watched until the manager of 10 plus years took the bag and left. Idiot. Story 19. Not showing up and not calling in. Everyone has a phone and can make up a crappy excuse. Call and let me know you are not going to show up so I can get someone else. Damn. Story 20. There was one time I had to fire someone because I sent him out on a job that would only take 3 hours to complete. Before he left, he mentioned to the receptionist that he was going to make it last all day. She mentioned it to me, and sure enough, he returned over 8 hours later. Being dishonest with a client's money is not something I was going to tolerate. Story 21. I told him to stop getting high before work. I even told him he was a good worker when not high and that I didn't care what he did off the clock. I literally told him that people could smell substances on him and that he acted like an idiot while high. He apologized, agreed with me, even offered up the fact that it was, in fact, affecting his work. Next day, shows up high. Sorry, guy, you're fired. Story 22. Personal hygiene. You'd think people would have the common courtesy to shower before working with others. That person smelled like pure beau with crap sprinkled on top. Story 23. Backstory. Employee Ed works a union job, works 40 hours per week, makes about $60K per year, full benefits, full pension, tons of paid vacation, and is in his early to mid-30s. Ed has absolutely no education. Did not even finish high school, is socially awkward, pretty much sucks at his job, is physically weak, often injured. Never enough for a doctor to find a problem, just enough to get alternate duty. Basically, the picture I'm painting is that Ed would be homeless if it wasn't for this job for life he's somehow lucked into. He is completely unemployable otherwise. Mother ducking Ed takes funeral leave for a Thursday and a Friday for his mother's funeral. Some other manager who seems to remember his mom dying a few years ago does some snooping and eventually asks for Ed turns in a faked obituary, gets found out, and fired. I still think about that guy sometimes. He turned down the best gig of his life for a stupid 4-day weekend when he had like 20 paid days off available for use anyway. Story 24. I worked with a guy who got fired for buying adult film on eBay all day at work. I thought this was pretty out there until I saw the other adult film at work stories here. But still, I think this takes the cake because he was internet savvy and still paying for secondhand adult DVD. That's varsity level work adult stupid. Story 25. I used to manage a hotel. You would not believe the amount of female employees I had to constantly remind it was against company policy to have sex with the guests. One woman, she was about 20 years old, who I had to remind this of several times, was caught mid-act having sex with a guy that was about 65 and looked like Santa Claus. After she was fired, one of her coworkers told me that this woman won a Santa Claus and thought she'd never get the opportunity to act on it, so it was worth possibly getting caught and fired. Girl was pretty decent looking too. Story 26. Worked at a fairly large used bookstore in NYC. We often listed and sold rare books online, and sometimes had really unusual items that were truly one of a kind, signed and numbered, or personally inscribed from one famous person to another, or whatever. One day, we get a phone call from one of the managers from the huge bookstore up the street, which also happens to be our biggest competitor. He explains that he has a large stack of merchandise that he is sure was stolen from our store. Apparently, earlier that day, a fellow had come to his store with some books and art prints he was hoping to sell. The manager looked a few of them up and quickly deduced that they were stolen. 2 of the items in particular were really exceptionally rare and obviously identifiable as belonging to us. This would have all been bad enough, but the manager had one last piece of information to share. Thing is, he says, I'm pretty sure that the guy who brought them in works for you. I've seen him over there a bunch of times. He usually works Sundays and Mondays. Tall guy, blonde hair, wears cowboy shirts, blah, 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 and proceeds to absolutely and without a shadow of a doubt identify our sales associate, Dan. Dan had apparently gone into our rare book room, stolen the books, which were already listed for sale on the internet, walked an entire 4 blocks to one of the most famous bookstores in the city, and tried to sell his stolen loot to one of the booksellers he saw at least twice a week in our store. Unbelievable. If we hadn't fired him for theft, we would have had to fire him for the epic stupidity. Story 27. Damn it, it's my time to shine. I was working in Australia and hired an American from Oregon. Let's call him Mark. I too am American, important. It wasn't one simple act, but a collection of retardancy so grand. I don't know if I can really type this. First things first. Damn this guy. So I hired him because I needed someone pronto and the hiring had to be done now. He was ready to go and able to do this relatively simple lifting job. The next day he got kicked out of the hostel he was in because someone stole his meat out of the fridge. He then asked me if he could stay with me till he found a new hostel. Whatever, sure. That's the dumbest thing I've ever done. Next day, I am sitting in my office, in my house, and I hear ducking. What the heck? I walk into the kitchen, other side of the house, and he is in there trying to cut a ducking can of blackberries in half with a butter knife. No crap. Dude, what are you doing? Man, what the hell? How are you supposed to open these things, bullcrap man? With a can opener. What? You mean like one of those things you use to open a beer? And he makes the hand gesture. Yeah, sort of. It's brother, really. Always on a pocket knife together, different ends, though. What, those are for beer? You're stupid. How would that even work? Beer bottles or screw off? Duck me, I walk off. 10 minutes later, I walk to the kitchen for water. Not really sure. Don't remember. But he is sitting on the couch, and it looks like he broke the can open with a rock, eating the black berries with his hands, covered in crap, smiling from ear to ear, I assume, because he foiled natural selection. 2 days. Later, at this point, he has proven to be a horrible, horrible employee, but at home, mind ducking, blowing. Sitting in my office, he just walks in and asks for a pair of socks. Damn that and damn you. I will let you borrow anything of mine except my underwear and socks. Nope. His are dirty, and he doesn't want to do a load. I tell him no, and he complains a bit but walks off. A few minutes later, he is back and is asking for a pair of scissors, whatevs. Top drawer, I say. He grabs them, says thanks, and walks off. He walks back into my office but just stands behind me, not saying anything. I ignore him for a solid minute. I can feel the energy building. Finally, I slump my shoulders and push off from my desk and turn around. This dumb mother ducker is so proud of himself. He holds up 2 socks. What is that? Dude, I made new socks! Huh? I took one of my old socks, cut it in half. Now I have a new pair. It suddenly clicks. I hired a spastic. Dude, what the duck are you talking about? You cut a sock in half. Now you just ruined a dirty sock. Back of my brain. Crap. New socks, it's clean socks. One sock covered his toes, but not his heel, and one sock covered his foot, but not his toes nor his heel. He wore those things for 3 days to prove a point. I fired him when I caught him bragging to a customer about hourly pay. But let's be honest here, it was the socks and blackberries that did it, among other things. He didn't move out for another 3 days. Story 28. A PC technician was being pestered with questions from a customer about sales stuff. He lost it, and while looking the customer square in the face, the employee had his eyes closed, however, said, "Get away from me or I'll eat your face." It took half the day to get over the laughter and what the heck of the situation before we could even begin on paperwork. Story 29. A dumb guy at work. Call him Julio. We worked clothing retail together. One night, closing shift, we are folding tons of clothing, working our way from the outer tables inwards, laughing and joking as we went. Julio is a fun guy to be around. Sometimes he'll moonwalk, dance, sing, general clownery to make the shift enjoyable. So that fateful night, we're almost done. About 8 of us are working on the last 2 tables of clothing. Julio does his funny dance from there to there and ends up grinding with a coworker. She dances along and he poked her with his boner. She noticed and angrily jumps away. Git was ducking her. Needless to say, Julio and Julio Jr. were fired for harassment. Story 30. In the interview, he was told he would have to take a substances test if he was hired. He was hired. He failed the substances test. When I brought him in and told him that he failed, he said, "Yeah, I knew I would." Then why? I'm sure it's not unusual, but still, why bother? He quit another job to take one that he knew he would lose immediately. Why? The other job, by the way, was janitor in a high school, which I assume he went back to. Story 31. Worked at KFC. Guy got fired for doing substances at work. In the office, where there are cameras. In hindsight, probably should have seen it coming. He showed up to the interview with shirt with the Wheel of Fortune board on it. Said, "Damn you." And underneath that, "Would you like to buy a vowel?" Guess that was his nicest shirt. Also, I once saw him eat ice out of a bucket that had raw standing chicken water. Kind of speaks volumes of KFC that he even got hired. Story 32. Not a boss, but HR had a guy on a temporary work comp transitional assignment at a retail store. His regular job had very good pay, a lot of benefits, etc. The git stole a used scuba suit from his temporary job site on camera. Bonus. We're well over 1,000 miles from any ocean. Story 33. I got a great one. My friend and I were both district managers for a vendor company that worked in Home Depot's building displays and merchandising. One day, one of the workers was on the store phone talking with one of the owners of the company. Owner hears in the background an in-store page for a manager he knows had been fired a month before. Turns out, this guy had made an hour-long recording of the inside sounds of a Home Depot and would play it on his stereo anytime someone would call him. Fooled everyone for months. My buddy and me drove to his house and parked outside and called him. My friend asked him where he was, and he goes, "I'm at the store." We tell him, "You might want to look out your window." We see his curtain part a little bit and close fast. We told him, "Don't bother coming out. You're fired." Gotta give him credit for the balls and ingenuity, though. Story 34. I'm not a boss, but a guy at a former job got fired because he broke a light fixture when he was ducking around with a mop. The manager on duty, who admittedly was a little insane, whipped his head around and in the most terrifying voice said, "Sweep that up, then get the duck out." Story 35. I had an employee call in sick a few busy retail Saturdays in a row. The pattern got me a bit suspicious, but I had no proof until A coworker who wasn't all too happy working up front short-handed again came into my office cell phone in hand to show me selfie photos that the sick employee had just posted to Facebook of her sunbathing. Story 36. This guy always tried to hide at work to avoid working. One day I was looking for him and I stepped into the bathroom. I notice a shoe print on the back of the toilet and I look up and one of the ceiling tiles is pushed a little to the side. I climb up there and this mother ducker is hiding in the ceiling. Story 37. Wasn't the boss circumflex sorry, but a co-worker at the gas station job I had in high school got fired for just pulling scratch-off lottery tickets off the roll and scratching them off right on the counter, directly in front of the security cameras we all knew about. Story 38. Parking in the fenced-in lot, chain-link fence. Along the street, he was smoking in his car and having sex with his girlfriend, and the cops decided to investigate since they knew it was after hours and should be empty. He could have driven 20 feet more and been behind a building. Story 39. This will get buried, but this guy thought it was a good idea to weld a big open top container of petrochemical solids, oily dirt, and it caught my container and my excavator on fire. Story 40. At my old job, my boss was very trusting, one of the give everyone a second chance types. Usually it worked out, and he got hardworking people helping him. He would trust us with things like using the company gas card to fill up the department truck, working late on our own with nobody else in the building, helping ourselves to snacks from the stockroom, etc. My last year there, when he knew I was planning on moving on to a new job, he hired on a new guy, let's call him Git, who we all saw right away wasn't the brightest bulb. He would do things like try the starter on a lawnmower while someone was under it checking the blade. Still, despite all this, he was a hard worker, and would do the labor-intensive jobs that nobody else really wanted. And the boss would occasionally loan him money as an advance on his paycheck when he needed gas money. Years later, I happened to run into an old coworker and chatted him up, asked how things were back at the company. He said Git had just gotten fired. I asked why, and it turns out that Git had been stealing the company gas card and filling up his Pinto with it. Yes, a Pinto. He'd sneak into the boss's office after Bossman had left for the day, get the gas card from his desk, and once everyone else was gone, he'd run down the street and fill up his car, then return the card like nothing happened. Well, he got busted when the boss saw a ton of late-night charges on the card and the mileage on the truck just didn't add up to all the gas use. Compared the shift times to when the charges were and figured out quickly who was stealing the card at night. Things only got worse when he found out that all the cash he had loaned to Git for gas money was instead being used to buy crack for him and his girlfriend. I wish I could say I was surprised when I heard all this. I was not. Story 41. I was working as an assistant manager of a small, local restaurant chain. We hired a new waitress. She had lots of experience and was really personable. I liked her. She began her first shift, and things were going smoothly. She's tending to her tables, and the guests are all happy. She required very little training, as she was pretty much autonomous. Partway into her shift, she began to become uneasy and nervous. She approached the general manager and asks if she can run home quickly. He tells her no. She seems slightly upset, but continues with her tables anyway. About an hour later, something is more visibly wrong. I decided to approach her. Since I'm a girl, I figured whatever issue she was having might be easier to say to me instead of our male GM. She begins to tell me that she got her period at the start of her shift and had no tampons or pads with her. I felt awful for her, but I had none of my own to give to her. I asked the GM if she could leave for 5 minutes to go across the street to the convenience store to get some pads. His remarks were basically, she just needs to deal with it and continue her shift. He had many laughs at her expense throughout the night, telling the other employees about what a baby she was and that she's whining. I'm not certain, but I'm sure it's a definite health risk to have a waitress tending tables and touching food. I had issue with this, but I didn't have authority over him. I asked if I could leave to get her some, to which he again refused. This poor girl starts crying. She tells him that she's saturated down there and really needs to leave, but she wants to come back to finish her shift. He had a lot of fun mocking her saturated plea. Finally, after hours of this poor waitress soaking, he decides to let her leave. It was closing time by that point. He made me call her the next day to tell her that we won't be keeping her as a server. I hated it. I quit shortly after. They treated their employees like crap, and I'm so glad I got out of there. Story 42. Had an employee show everyone, every other employee, and every customer his really, really big pocket knife. He always follows his big reveal with a smug, largest one allowed by law. After being repeatedly told to knock it off, we worked at help desk for crying out loud, I had to can him. Story 43. As a recruiter, I've had to pull people off assignments for watching adult film on their work computer on day one of the job. He left it up, the Git. It came by while he was on his lunch break to install some software, and lo and behold, adult film. Also had to pull a woman off an assignment when she spent a week getting hammered on vodka and drunk dialing her on-site supervisor. Ada. The first thing the managers did was investigate to make sure he wasn't the victim of a crappy prank. Even if they didn't check, my hands were tied. If the company where I place someone tells me to get them someone else, My personal opinion of it doesn't matter. Story 44. Guy told everyone on the break room how the boss's daughter wanted his junk, and the next day came to work and overdosed. I'm the daughter and didn't want his junk. Story 45. Not the boss, but a former employee. I worked at a dock construction company working the Potomac. Before I get into this, I'd like to add almost everyone but myself was an ex-con. Regularly smoked on the job and didn't have a driver's license. So anyways, we're on a barge working on some new dock. We have to break out the chainsaw to cut a piling to size once it's in. Boss was a cheapskate, rented a really crappy chainsaw. Coworker can't get it to start, loses his crap, and throws the rented chainsaw into the river. He then proceeds to push an excavator attachment that vibrates the pilings into the mud, off the boat into about 10 to 20 foot deep water. This thing is worth I don't even know how many thousands. It's gone, sunk to the bottom. He's technically the most senior staff at the job site, so he has all the keys. He hops into the base boat we were pulling the barge in, disconnects it, gets 1,000 or so feet down shore towards his car, and slams the boat into riprap. Then he gets in his car and leaves. All the while, he's screaming, cursing, raging, and even crying. All of that because the chainsaw wouldn't start. Granted, it was the worst, shadiest company I've ever worked for. And that day was an exceptionally horrid day, but damn. Needless to say, he was very fired. I believe my boss actually threatened to, and then tried, to find and hit him. Story 46. My previous employer didn't exactly fire me, but did put me on a permanent, unpaid, forced medical leave until my migraines were resolved. I should note that I had not missed a single day due to migraine. I sued, and they settled. Story 47. 2 different tellers. One was my ATM teller. She stole the cash from the same guy twice, who worked across the street. Didn't take long to figure out. Second was my vault teller. Stole $3,000. On her day off was a yearly branch-wide surprise audit. She assumed she was done with audits for the quarter. The vault, obviously, was short. I don't know why these two thought they could get away with essentially robbing a bank. Story 48. Had to fire a brand new employee. Second day on the job for backing out the maintenance truck. He neglected to close the wide-open passenger door, and it got caught on the concrete security pillars. Bent back the door past 90 degrees out. Then the git attempted to drive forward as if nothing happened, like he bumped into a curb. Several of our employees had to flag him down halfway down the parking lot because he wouldn't stop. "Oh, my bad," was all he said. We started mandatory substances tests for all new employees after that. Story 49. I used to be a recruiter, so there are a lot of great stories, but this is my favorite. I didn't have to physically take this person off the job, but I was involved secondhand. I got a call from a temp employee working in the cafeteria of a large call center in town. She was yelling that people were after her, that her boss was hitting her in the back of the head. For a moment, I was concerned and thought I should call the police. But as she continued to go on and on, I realized she was just crazy. The company she worked within is a Fortune 500 company, and we'd worked with her supervisor for years. He was not hitting her in the back of the head. We sent one of the other recruiters down there to figure out what was going on and to pull her off the job. I spoke to her supervisor, and he said she just went nuts and was accusing everyone of hitting her in the back of the head. No one had touched her or really gone near her. The supervisor and security wanted her gone because she kept screaming and running around, but she wouldn't leave. So I wasn't there, but I know how it went down. The other recruiter arrived, and she immediately ran into his arms like a child. She screamed, "Oh, Mr. Richard, they hitting me in the back of my head!" and wept openly onto him. When he made it apparent she was fired, she ran away crying, and everyone chased her. She ended up on the floor crying, and they all had to pick her up and call her emergency contact to come get her. It was her first day. We reviewed the security tapes, and no one hit her in her head. Her sister said she would sometimes have outbursts, where she felt like the devil was possessing her, but she apparently got over them quickly. She reapplied a few months later and was turned down for past terminations, but she looked great. Story 50. I ran a production team a few years back, making virtual tours for hotels and whatnot. Our itty guy was chronically late, full of excuses, and always sleeping on the job. He spent his time at home playing FPS games all night and bragging about it at work. He was almost totally useless, but he was one who wrote the code that powered the 360 degrees photo tour. So as bad as he was, we were stuck with him, and he knew it. For months, I tried to convince the CEO to let him go. He wouldn't do it, mostly because they were old friends. The CEO, who worked out of a branch in another city, was convinced that it would take more money and time to train a new coder than we were losing just keeping him. So the it guy stayed. One Monday, after he walked in an hour late, he pulled his chair to his desk, put his head down, and started snoring. It was so blatant, something snapped, and after a few minutes I threw a pencil at him. I walked out of the office and called the CEO on the phone. I said something like, "This is too much. My performance is evaluated by the production of my team, and my team is useless as long as he is here." The CEO relented slightly, so he told me, "Fine, take him aside. and let him know that if he's late again tomorrow, he's fired. It was clear that the CEO was just placating me, hoping that coming to work on time for one day would be an easy enough chore for the guy that it would all work out. I took him into the conference room and told him, "Listen, you aren't working. If you are late again tomorrow, I will have to fire you." Soon after our meeting, he got a call from the CEO who basically told him, "Hey man, make sure to come into work on time tomorrow." I was completely ready to fire him if he was even 1 minute late. I always got to work at 7 o'clock, and the rest of the office, including the IT guy, started at 8 o'clock. So I waited and waited and waited. The dude showed up at 9:45. He walked to his desk like nothing was wrong, pulled his chair to his desk, put his head down, and started snoring. It has never felt so good to fire someone. Story 51. One of the girls who worked for me when I managed a Blimpies came in, clocked in, and told me it was her last day. I was not too sad to see her go, but I knew I'd have to cover all her shifts and train a new person. You may say to yourself now, CERN, we asked about firing, not quitting? Yeah. She not only refused to work her last shift, she refused to pretend to work. She stood in the way in the narrow lane I walk up and down to make sandwiches. This was 1998, so she did not have a cell. So she either kept making calls on the business phone, fax, or waiting for calls. I told her if she wasn't going to work, she should just leave. So she made more phone calls looking for a ride, and then continued to stand in the work area, in uniform, staring at customers but not helping them. I told her to go wait in a booth for her ride, and she said something rude. She continued to be hostile and scare away customers, so I told her she had to leave now, or I would call the cops and tell them she was trespassing. That got her off the property. Then I went back to the office and erased her punch-in for the day. Felt good, man. That is the one time I fired someone. I may have been responsible or witnessed others, but that is the one I did. Story 52. Had an interview with a prospective aircraft mechanic who referred to himself as Jazz. Since we were short-handed, we decided to give him a chance. First day, I put him on rebuilding some brake calipers, standard noob mechanic job, and the brake table is right in front of the boss's window to the hangar. This kid lights up a cigarette and sits there like nothing is wrong, except, the huge no smoking sign sitting right above his head. Well, I get a page over the PA from the boss to come into the office. As I walk in, I see Jazz smoking and tell him rather clearly that there is no smoking in the hangar. He says, "Yeah, okay," and throws the butt on the ground and stomps it out. I walk past him to the boss's office, and she tells me that he has been standing there for 10 minutes doing nothing but smoking. So I go out and tell him I need 2 sets of calipers done for an aircraft that's taking off in an hour. He says, "Yeah, I think I'm going to take lunch first," and walks into the office, clocks out, lights up a cigarette, and walks into the boss's office and asks when payday is. She gives me the fire his ass look, and I ask him to step outside. I tell him that he's done and didn't make the cut. "Now you can leave. Goodbye. Don't come back." His first reaction, take a swing at me. He misses by a long shot and hits the reinforced glass on the front door. He broke a few bones and threatened to sue us underground for everything we never owned, then proceeded to call us every day for almost a month to ask when he should come back in. Story 53. I had to fire someone for stealing someone's lunch from the break room. It was a security firm, and he was a security tech. Everything was under camera except the bathroom. I fired him because he should have known that, not because he stole someone's lunch. Story 54. I was a district manager for a specialty retailer. I received a call from the loss prevention manager that one of my stores had a couple of outstanding deposits. Not a huge deal, but something to be addressed. I called the store to ask how many deposits they had in their safe, and per my conversation with the store manager, all the money was accounted for. He just had not made it to the bank yet. I decided to stop by his store to confirm the deposits were present and do him a favor by running them to the bank since he was so busy. I get to the store. It's not terribly busy, so I have him go to the back to get the deposits. When the safe opens, the money isn't there. What should have been several $1,000s in cash was maybe 100 or so in small bills and coin. I keep my cool, tell him we can sort it out, but I have to call the loss prevention manager to let him know what's up. The loss prevention manager comes to the store. By now, another employee has come in, so the 3 of us, me, the LPM, and SM, go to the back to have a meeting. We start talking, and the SM breaks down and admits he has been floating deposits for weeks now. He just couldn't make ends meet, had a small child, etc., etc. Then it takes a turn for the worse because he starts only talking to the LPM in Spanish, which I do not speak. Guy explains that he's actually an illegal immigrant, used a fake stolen identity when he took the job. I did not hire him. He was in place when I took over the district, and yes, had stolen thousands in cash and merchandise. The LPM takes me outside, explains the situation, and says we're going to play it off like we can work it all out if we can get a signed confession from him. The SM writes the confession. Once we have it, the police were called. The SM was taken out in handcuffs. After the guy is cuffed, I have to let him know he's also officially terminated. It was a bad day for all involved. Story 55. A couple of co-workers decided to start dealing substances at the hospital we worked at, and thought using the internal email system was a good way to keep in touch with customers. Story 56. As a IT admin since the dark modem ages, I have seen it all. But one story stands out, the guy with an fishing addiction. That's quite common in Norway. It's an outright hell to arrange a project meeting because of salmon fishing. Deer fishing, moose fishing. Wait a moment, I think you shoot some of those things. Anyway, we kill everything that swims, walk, or fly, and we have to be away from the office to do it. But this guy was seriously into fishing and fly binding. So he searches and click on everything related, yep, as in CP nymphets, where there try to post CP. After cleaning his computer for pictures, he had to go. Story 57. Ran a haunted house last year. I ran an outdoor corn type of haunted house. The break room was in the center of the entire haunted corn maze. In the break room were 2 picnic tables, a water cooler, and plastic cups. One night, halfway through October, I walked into the break area to see one of my monsters lighting his plastic cup on fire. Kid didn't realize why he was being fired so quickly. Story 58. I was a retail manager for a long time. The weirdest experience I ever had firing someone was when we had to terminate a guy who didn't even work for us. This guy put his application in, had an interview, and we decided not to hire him because it was a customer service position, and he didn't speak English or Spanish. The interview ends, and he leaves. Our standard procedure was to simply not call people back to let them know they didn't get it. No email was sent or anything. Somehow, the guy got the idea that he was hired for an overnight position instead. We were expecting an associate transfer from another store in a few weeks, and the overnight manager assumed this was him when the unhired guy showed up to work. A lot of times, transferred employees would take some time to show up in the system for scheduling and things like that. They just do manual timesheets until it is fixed. So I'm closing one night and I'm bullcrafting with one of the managers a lot longer than I normally do. And I see the unhired guy. I was like, what the heck is he doing here? And the overnight manager says, oh, that's our new transfer from the other store. Doesn't talk much, but he is an okay worker. So he had been working for like 3 weeks before I noticed basically creating a HR cluster duck. The solution was pay him out based on the hours he worked and have him sign some paperwork. Our home office's legal department had to write up just for this particular incident. Story 59. I had an employee who was getting drunk on the job. I found him in a hallway, on the floor, wasted. He told me that he got bad headaches, and the only cure was champagne on crushed ice. Story 60. My mom once had to fire this one guy. He kept making comments about a coworker. He was given warnings, so he switched to doing it in Spanish. The girl was from Mexico. She spoke Spanish. He got fired. Story 61. Bar manager here. Had to sack another bartender for showing up morbidly drunk. I mean, abso-ducking, lootly crap-faced, cross-eyed duckard. I'm not a totally cold-hearted git. Strange crap happens in this line of work. But the icing on the cake was when he pulled out his banana and started waving it at the regulars at the bar. I tried to stop him, and he took a swing at me, missed and fell over, passed out. I spoke to him a couple days later. He didn't remember a thing. It's become great barroom lore at work. Remember the time Jimmy pulled out his junk? Ha, ha, ha. You should have seen the look on your face. Ha, ha, ha. Story 62. One of my safety and security officers had an accident at work. He somehow got his hand between a door and its frame. A week later, I got a call from insurance asking for video evidence. So I glance over it, and what do I see? The guy is walking up to the heaviest door, opening it, putting his hand on the frame and smashing it shut. He then inspects his hand, obviously in a lot of pain, and then does it again. I called him into my office and asked him about the accident. He told me the story of the door just flying shut, and that he had no chance because it was so unexpected. I then watched the video with him. When he realized what was going on, he started to say that it is not him, even though he was on camera. I asked him to resign, and he did, pointing out once again that this is not him. I later met his wife when she came over to threaten with legal action. Firing someone because of an accident is a criminal offense, she said, swearing at me. He had to be there too, and I realized that he married a dragon that was controlling his every step. He probably injured himself to have some free time while she is at work. I told her that we are a crafty company and do not care, which is also true. Of course, they never pressed charges. Story 63. I say stupid because stuff like this should never happen in the workplace. We had to let 2 older women, approximately mid-58s, early 60s, go because they kept harassing this one poor woman who was younger than them. The girl was not the best worker, but she was very nice and tried very hard. But these 2 older women would do things like dump soda on her chair, pull keys off her keyboard so she couldn't get work done on time, etc. One time, the girl's computer wouldn't work, so I popped the tower open and the power cables to the hard drive were cut. Now this was a small IT consulting company with only 10 employees, so it was pretty easy to suspect either one or both of them, but there were no cameras. My boss didn't want to spend the money for cameras, so I brought an IP camera I had from home and set it up hiding behind a plant. Real covert ops crap. Sure enough, before long, I saw them over at her soda dumping something into it. We suspected Tony. These ladies should have been brought up on criminal charges. I mean, who knows what else they did to her. The girl ended up passing away from liver failure about a year later. She was very nice. To this day, I hope those two old bats are struggling financially from their nonsense. Why would anyone act like that? Story 64. I own a catering company. 2 quick stories. One time, I asked one of my employees to fill a cooler with bottles of water and ice. When I came to check on her an hour later, she had filled the cooler with ice and had opened every individual water bottle and dumped it into the cooler. She also didn't understand why that was wrong. A few weeks later, I gave the same lady the task of melting some butter for a clam bake. She put about 25 pounds of butter in a double boiler pot and turned on the burner. She decided it would be a good idea to walk away from the pot of melted butter to go have a cigarette. When she came back, the butter was burnt and boiling. In a panic, this woman decided to take a bucket of ice and dump it into the pot, so the butter wouldn't be burnt anymore. The ice mixed with the boiling butter caused the molten butter to basically explode and cover the entire kitchen. Everyone was standing there in disbelief that she had sprayed hot butter over everyone. She also had the audacity to tell me that it was my fault that I didn't tell her not to put ice in molten burnt butter. Now that I think about it, I don't know why I hired her in the first place. Story 65. Had an employee get caught safe 20 substances in the produce cooler. He did offer to share. Another incident, all of lobsters kept dying off several times. Several thousands of dollars worth of lobsters, even after cleaning the tank a couple of times in case there were some lobster-hating germs in there. Turns out, one of the overnight floor cleaners was staging gladiatorial lobster battles. Unfortunately, he forgot to wash his hands that were covered in floor cleaning chemical. Did not bode well for Spartacus and his armored brethren. Story 66. I'm a manager for a well-known pizza chain. We use GPS tracking to keep track of our delivery folks, mostly just in case a customer calls in and asks, "Dude, where's my pizza?" Delivery guy takes a couple of orders out to drop off in the same area. Customer, call in, "Hey, we ordered over an hour ago. Where is the pizza?" I check the GPS system. Delivery looks like it's 1 or 2 blocks away, depending on who he drops off first. I say, "Looks like within 5 minutes. I'm sorry for the wait. Would you like me to email you some discount codes for the wait? Blah, blah, blah." 15 minutes pass. Calls again. "Hey, still no pizza. I want a refund." I say, "I'm sorry, sir. Certainly, and I will still send you some coupons." Check the GPS system. Car still in the same spot. Drive out to check on driver. 1. He is asleep in the car. Seat cranked back. 2. Has a cord and adapter plugged into his cigarette lighter. 3. It's connected to an old-ass electrical blanket that is wrapped around the pizzas inside the thermal delivery bag. Dude, it's damn pizza delivery. Drop off the pizza while it's hot. Make sure the order is right. Done. Ducktard. Fired. Story 67. Fired someone for lying about time theft. He would swipe out after a few hours of nap time in the staff room, and the lone payroll guy, who is responsible for 830 employees, would just okay it. We caught him and confronted him about it. The union backed him, of course, and all he had to do to wipe the slate clean of thousands of dollars of time theft was to admit it. He said he was innocent, we submitted our video evidence, and he was fired. He spent 6 months disputing the firing. The entire time, he expected a huge payout. He was told to find a new job by his own union because his fate was as good as sealed. But he's a lazy crap, and he refused. He expected to win his grievance and to be back paid. When we were done arguing our case, we ended up paying out $500. He expected $21,000. His face was priceless. Even though I felt good because I was sick of this cancerous a hole influencing my staff, it eats me up that he just had a kid a year before. His wife is from out of country and can't legally work here. And now the best he can do is $4 less an hour for the same job. He has to find this job without a reference from the last 8 years. Then I remember that he had every chance in the world to rectify the situation, and he could have avoided the entire situation by working the hours he claimed to work. Story 68. I worked in a fast food kiosk in an amusement park. We had a machine that cooked our burgers and toasted our buns. One of those ones where the food goes through on a conveyor belt. One day, it was raining. While walking to the kiosk, a girl got wet. So, logically, she took her clothes off and put them through the machine so the heat could dry them. Her shirt caught on fire and set the kitchen sprinklers off. Her shoe forced the 2 toasting plates in the bun section far apart, creating a large repair bill. Story 69. Guy who worked in the mailroom figured he could score a new laptop by ordering one in the CEO's name and forging a purchase order. Someone busted him before the laptop even arrived. Story 70. This is more sad than stupid, but he should have known. One of my programmers was working at a customer, and during his lunch break, decided to visit a website of a friend. The website had the option to leave a message. Smart programmer as he was, he left a message that was actually some code and would pop up a new window with a hello message. Technically, this is hacking a website. The internet provider of the website caught the hack and determined what IP address this came from. They then called that company, my customer, and threatened to shut down their internet. All alarm bells went off, and this was escalated to the CIO. This was a big company. And within a few minutes, they found out what workstation was used and who was using it. I was called and threatened to do something, or we would lose the contract. This was a 7-figure contract. I had to inform corporate, tried to explain what happened, but the only action acceptable was to fire the idiot. So before he could finish his lunch, my programmer was fired for pulling a prank on his friend's website. It was a very good programmer. So the next day, I made some phone calls, and within a week, he had a new job. But he learned his lesson. Story 71. Had to fire a guy because he was breaking into rural farm homes and stealing prescription medication. He would knock on the door, and if someone answered, he'd ask if they were selling farm equipment, then leave. If nobody answered, he took it as an invitation. During one heist, some personal information fell out of his truck, and the cops ended up calling us. He's currently serving 10 years in jail. Story 72. Worked in big box electronics store and once fired a guy for breaking a pen. The individual in question had been with the company since he was 14, and around the age of 17, he started to get an attitude that was not pleasurable for anyone. He would constantly swear in front of leadership, call in sick when he was hungover, and would draw junk all over my whiteboard I used for communication to my other staff. Was out of camera view, so I couldn't prove it was him. So I got told by pure management that I needed to find a reason to either make him quit or make a paper trail for him to get fired. So I came in for my regular shift on a truck night and did my usual routine of greeting all my staff to make sure they were all set for the night and didn't need anything from me when I decided to check on the train wreck of an employee and found that he had destroyed about 3 pens and had all the pieces scattered all over my desk. Walked in the general manager's room, handed in a write-up for termination with cause, destruction of company property, and shook the little git's hand on the way out. Story 73. My favorite event happened right after Christmas in 2012. The grooming salon needed some extra help washing dogs, so I hired a sweet, young redheaded girl. We will call Lizzie. Now, the head groomer and her assistant were a pair of mean freaking biznitches and decided they didn't like Lizzie, so they came up with a plan to make Lizzie leave. Lizzie has just gotten a nice new purse for Examy, so the head groomer and her assistant decided, hey, let's ruin Lizzie's purse. When Lizzie found what they did, she came running to me crying with the most awful-smelling purse in the world. Thankfully, the groomer biznatches weren't too smart and did it in front of a camera. Lizzie and I both sat horrified as we watched it. When I was firing the 2 girls, they told me the whole process. They decided to collect dog feces and old rotten Chinese food, mix it all in a baggie and let it ferment for a week, then poured it in the poor girl's new bag. Both of these women were in their early 30s with children. Sigh. Story 74. I had a worker tell a customer that they couldn't buy something because it was haunted. I had to give her credit for the try, so I put in the paperwork to get her pay for the rest of the day. Story 75. I was put in as manager for a week while the real boss was out for business. Within the first hour of being put in charge the first real day. This is a kitchen, mind you, one of my coworkers decided to pleasure himself in the walk-in fridge. Really? Who the heck does that? Story 76. This story is legend in my hometown. There was a strange dude named Murray, a local kid that had something wrong with his thought spot. Never fired on all cylinders. Murray got a job at a pizza place as a pizza maker, which was a good job for him. Stays in the back and doesn't face the public. All was well until a driver called in sick. Murray decides it's his night to shine and offers up his services as a delivery driver. Unbeknownst to the company, Murray didn't have a driver's license. That didn't stop him. This was his big night. Murray got pulled over beside the elementary school. Well, that won't stop him either. Murray grabs the pizzas and makes a run for it through the soccer field. It's around midnight and dark out. Murray turned to see if the police were chasing him and proceeded to run into a large white metal pole that I call a soccer net. Pizza went flying. Murray got arrested and fired. Damn Murray. Story 77. At Fuddruckers, we serve hand-dipped bluebell shakes, malts with whipped cream on top. For months, our food distributor was sending us dud cases of whipped cream that was shooting out like heavy whipping cream. I called the other Fuddruckers in the area, and all of their whipped cream cans were working fine. I called the distributor, manufacturer, to ask questions and see if there was a problem. Nope. Well, apparently, I'm the only one in the world who didn't try Whippets as a kid, and therefore didn't know I had an attic cook sucking all nitrous oxide out of the cans. I wish we had cameras to see my face when I caught him red-handed with a can of whipped cream in his mouth. I just thought the guy loved whipped cream. Story 78. My dad worked in a food manufacturing factory, one of the biggest companies in the world. For 30 years, the engineers were allowed to bring in things from home to fix or work on in the workshops when they weren't doing official work. In the 90s, my dad built a Tracy Island from Thunderbird's toy for me and my brother. But in the last 5 years, they decided out of the blue to ban this. And they were really strict about it. So strict that when a worker brought in a lawnmower to fix, the crap hit the fan. The guy fixing the lawnmower was suspended and subsequently fired after a lengthy review. The guy that went out to his car to help him bring it in was suspended for 3 months. And the 2 people that held doors open for them were suspended for a month. These are all guys in their 40s and 50s that had worked there for decades, and this retarded situation cost them all their careers. Story 79. Years ago, we had a guy get caught selling Adult, a website hosted from his government computer. This was back in the days when the network security was extremely lax. The only reason this guy got caught was because he took his computer into it and asked them to clean it up because it was running slow. We've also had guys get caught for stealing controlled items and selling them on the local Craigslist without even bothering to remove any of the identifying marks. Bosses of Reddit, what's the craziest thing an employee has done while at work? Did you fire him or her? I wasn't the boss, but I helped my boss get a coworker fired. I was working in a record store at the time. Had this slacker kid that was all sorts of cocky for a coworker, always bragging about something. But he did his job, so we dealt with it. Now, before I go further, know this. Record stores have a crap ton of regulars, more than any other job I've ever had. You get to know your customer. We had a young woman come in all the time that was slightly special. She was good enough, go out on her own on the bus and be on her own for hours. Super sweet. Loved pop music. Each Tuesday, she'd come in and buy whichever new one came out. We started to put one aside for her each week. Then we didn't see her for a month or so. I want to say NSYNC had a new album come out, or someone like that. I saw her come back in, no smile, no cheeriness. She snuck in and came over to me and asked for the CD. I asked her what's up and where she'd been and if she was okay. She turned red and told me that it was embarrassing. I, not wanting to pry, told her about her stack of pop CDs and told her sorry she's sad. She asked about the slacker to make sure he wasn't here today. What did he do? It's the first thing I said. I knew he did something in that moment. She wrote it down because she didn't want to say it out loud. Paraphrasing, it's been a long time. Hey, after work, we could meet up and if you do BJ, is what he told her. I asked her to wait there. I went and got the bossman. He came out and apologized profusely for what happened and bought her CDs personally. Corporate was called. They flew in. Or drove in, IDR. This was 10 years ago, minimum. The next day when he came in, they took him in the office and flipped their crap on it. He was escorted out and they told us they'd handle things. We never heard any more about it, but our customer was never sad again. Story 2. Hospital has a dog park kind of thing where people can go hang out with their dogs outside. This includes letting the dog poo so long as you pick it up. We ended up getting lots of really large poops out there that the owners weren't picking up. We post bigger pick up your crap posters and set up a camera. Come to find out it was a night shift nurse going out there and crapting in the dog park at night. They were fired in relatively short order. Story 3. An employee constantly pleasure himself in his cubicle, under his desk. The reason I say constantly is because when he was actually caught by a female employee and reported, another boss went to look at his cubicle. What he found was absolutely appalling. Under his desk, there was semen everywhere. He worked there for over 10 years. He covered the smell by always having some type of air freshener going. We should have taken the hint sooner. In the end, he was fired. Story 4. A large corporation with lots of cubes fired one employee who had a really sweet office chair. After the employee was fired, he requested his office chair back. After proving it was bought by fired employee and not company, HR went back to get it a week later for the fired employee. Sweet office chair was missing. HR does an investigation and finds a manager in another department with a sweet office chair. HR asks manager where he got a sweet office chair. Manager claimed the chair was his for years and lied to HR. HR has fired employee identify his chair as that of the manager's chair for years. Manager is fired from a higher than six-figure job because he lied about a damn chair. Story 5. I worked at a large bank as teller through school. The branch was in a not-so-great side of town and had large bulletproof glass separating the tellers from the customer. A man came up to my coworker's window and slid a note through the tray saying he had a gun and demanded the money in his drawer. My friend looked at the note, laughed, threw it in the trash, and continued counting processing a transaction for the drive-thru. The man was so confused. He stood there another 30 seconds and left. I didn't know any of this was taking place. After he left, I asked my coworker what that guy wanted. Oh, he just tried to rob us. It turned into a crap show at the branch. This is not the policy of handling a robbery. A full investigation was done, and my coworker was fired. Story 6. I worked at Dairy Queen as a teenager. We has this really cookie teenage girl work with us for a couple months. She would constantly lie about the state of her parents and siblings. My mom is alive, in Florida, has cancer, is a marathon runner. When called out on it, she would run down to the storage room and cry. Our cake decorator, a sweet old retired lady, would always run down to comfort her. A few weeks of this, and the cake decorator had enough as well and stopped chasing her down. So she took it up another notch and started making crazy made-up stories about the retired lady. She used to be a man and the husband she talks about is actually her, etc. She got written up for this, and things were normal again for a week or two. She then started to claim she was abused between 3 or 50 times in her life, depending on who she was talking to, by every male in her life, including people in town we all knew. She kept on changing her stories on that as well, and went back to her running downstairs to cry act for few days until she realized it was getting her no attention. She then claimed she had multiple personalities and acted them out like a bad TV movie. One was a man, and apparently waking up in a woman's body was traumatizing enough that she always had to immediately go home after he emerged. It was always when we were busy too. Her formerly dead mother would always call afterwards and tell the manager that her daughter truly wasn't feeling well. Then she was pregnant. Then she lost a baby. A week after that, gossiping about idiots with another girl who worked there. She claimed she was a virgin and waiting for marriage. Until then, her quirkiness was mostly harmless. Then things changed for the worse. She said a fry cook abused her when they went outside to smoke for 5 mins. She came back in a little later than he did crying, with part of her uniform collar ripped. What she didn't know is that the other fry cook was sitting in his car about 30 feet away listening to music waiting for his shift to start. He saw them smoking. He saw the other guy go inside. Then he saw her flipping out, but didn't want to get involved because of past lying behavior. She leaned her forehead against a wall for several mins, trying to tear at her collar, hitting herself in the face a couple times as well. When this was revealed, the manager immediately fired her, inviting 2 female employees into his office with him while he was firing her, so she wouldn't make up stories about him as well. Even after she was fired, some of the girls found these short stories she wrote online. Story 7, I guess not the craziest, but one of my middle-aged employees constantly repeated the same joke. As awkward as it was, I couldn't fire him for it. I work for a gas company and we have to dig in people's yards. Every single time a person would ask us what we're doing, this guy would respond with, "We're here to wreck your yard," but he would say it with an old-school Dracula voice. So it would sound like this, "Veer here to veck vervard." The customer would just look at him confused, and I had to jump in and explain properly. He did this every single time. I told him to stop repeatedly, but he honestly thought it was hilarious. Story 8. I have this one employee who is always on Reddit. He doesn't know. I know it yet. We're going to hold off confronting him on it until we have enough of a case to fire him. Story 9. We hired some temp staff to help us over Xmas in the shop and asked one of them to stand at the front of the store to great customer, see if they'd like a personal shopper or any other help. A few hours later, I went to check on how they were doing and couldn't find her. I looked around but gave up and went to walk back. As I turned to head back to my desk, I see that our giant Christmas tree is looking a little disheveled, so I go and tidy it up. Once I'm close to the tree, I can see the temp hidden inside it, looking terrified. She had suffered a panic attack pretty soon after she started and climbed into the tree to hide. I struggle with anxiety myself. It was working at the store that had helped to sort me out a bit. So I didn't report it to anyone higher up than me. I just took her back to the office to calm down and drink tea, got someone else to do the greeting, and popped her on the checkouts. That didn't stop the story spreading amongst every member of staff in a matter of minutes. Story 10. Saw 2 coworkers ducking in our stockroom security footage. They've worked there for over a year. They knew there was cameras there. They wanted to be seen. Story 11. I was the manager of an art studio that was very busy and dealt with a lot of children. I hired this girl that looked and acted completely normal during her interview, but showed up to training wearing the most skin-tight pair of leggings I've ever seen to date. I mean, you could see the dimples in this chick's ass, not to mention her obvious camel toe. I had to awkwardly explain to her that leggings that show camel toe have no place around children. She said she was sorry and that it wouldn't happen again. So she comes in the next day with jeans that were even tighter. These things were so tight that she couldn't even have a camel toe. So I had to even more awkwardly explain to her that, while she technically followed my last request, skin-tight clothing was not permitted in any form. I fired her later because she was a git. I found out later that she was notorious in the area for doing nude modeling for dodged that bullet. Story 12. When I was in high school, 2 lunatics made me the assistant manager of their super relaxed Christian bookstore outlet. It was a huge store that sold more than books. CDs, DVDs, paintings, huge framed pictures, jewelry, etc. My non-sales associate duties included submitting hours for payroll, writing and mailing checks for the utility bills, interviewing potential associates, and keeping up with product placement. One of my much older coworkers, Brian, always creeped me out. At 16 years old, I didn't realize he would talk to me inappropriately. I thought, hey, I'm the boss. I'm an adult. Well, he was always asking me if I'd ever done some act or another, and I just thought he was an idiot. One day, I sat down to write our checks to send out and noticed that we had a phone bill. What the heck? So I called my boss, and he said it was probably a mistake and he'd fix it. I asked him to pick up some colored ink for our printer before he came because we were out, and he said he just put new ink in. My young self was now feeling incompetent. I can't do anything I'm supposed to do. Meanwhile, Brian is being super weird. He's asking me about bills and partners and when our boss is coming in. He checks out a customer who buys a big frame picture off the wall, and I say, I'll go get the box in the back. He looks nervous, ducking weirdo. So I go find the box, and it's heavy, really heavy. I open it, and inside is a whole ream of papers worth of printed, dirty photo. Ducking gross. I immediately called my boss, who came in and had a talk with Brian. Apparently, Brian was having some intimate paid conversations on the work phone when the store was slow. My boss let him keep his job, and Brian paid the phone bill off week by week. The day he made his last payment, my boss told me to fire him for whatever reason I could find. So I ended up firing him for being late getting back from break. Flash forward 13 years. My best friend was married to the escort back in the 80s, and I didn't know until 5 years into our friendship. Wonder why they didn't make it. Story 13. I wasn't a boss, but a coworker. I used to work at the U.S. Patent Office as a patent examiner. One of my fellow patent examiners was from Africa and was running an illegal arranged marriage for green card business out of his office. He was eventually caught, fired, and arrested. Story 14. Not one of my employees, but I am the one that initiated his removal. Several years ago, I was in charge of a data center, typical 24 hours a day operation. I got an automated alert from a server late one evening and decided to drive to the office. I asked the server farm admin to meet me there. The corporate help desk, also a 24/7 operation, was situated right outside the data center. This fateful night, just one person was working there. The data center and help desk were effectively in the middle of the building, so there was no way for anyone sitting there to know that someone was in the office. I walked around the corner to find the lone help desk person sitting in front of his monitor with his pants around his ankles. He obviously didn't hear me walking down the hall, so let's just say he was in the middle of the task at hand. Out of sheer reflex, I rather loudly said, "Dude, what the heck?" An awkward scramble to simultaneously turn off his monitor and pull up his pants ensued. I said that I was going to go into the data center to address a server issue, and he had better get himself sorted out before I return. As I step into the data center, I called the guy who was in charge of the help desk. I had to explain to him what just happened, and suggested that he may want to have a conversation with his support rep. As I finish up the call, the server farm admin enters the data center. He looks at me somewhat puzzled and asked why no one was sitting at the help desk. Apparently, the support rep knew his days were numbered and just bolted. The next day, I had another conversation with the help desk manager. Obviously, he fired the rep. The rep made it easy because he abandoned his job. Otherwise, it could have come down to his word versus mine. The kicker was that apparently the rep was rumored to have been a phantom fapper, but no one had really caught him in the act. Story 15. I was an assistant manager at an adult theater store. I mean, right away, that should tell you that some of your employees are going to be a little odd. It's not a field that attracts the generation's best and brightest. I would open the store in the mornings. I mean, we never closed, but we still called it the store opening. Around 8 in the morning, things are slow, so it's when money issues, inventory, etc. was taken care of. I started to be concerned over opened packages. The product hanging in back of the row would often be found to be open. At first, you pass it off as a damaged package, but there seemed to be a pattern. Every model of junk sleeve had at least one opened package. Every single one. Checking the tape, I found the culprit. Dave, not his real name, worked nights, and every night on his shift, he would take one of those products into the bathroom, do his thing, and then reseal the box with glue or tape. I don't know how many products we sold pre-used. After he was fired, we found out he had also been shaking down the working customers for favors in exchange for not being bothered in the theater section with their clients. Story 16. I manage an IT department for government office. Get a call that a user's laptop hard drive won't let him save files anymore. My first thought is hardware failure or virus, malware. I sit down at the user's desk, and there's a folder right on the desktop that says AMBC. Shouldn't be there, so I open it. A lot of adult film. I turn to look at the guy as he's standing behind me, and with a straight face and unprompted, he says, "I love them." He was gone the next day. Story 17. I was hiring a new employee It had been a couple years since we hired anyone, so I went through and updated our employee manual. After I did that, I left a few copies for our other employees in case anyone was interested. One of the things that was put in the employee manual was a 3 strikes you're out policy. Do something wrong the first time, and it's a verbal warning. Second time, you're written up and sent home for the day. Third time, you're fired. One of our guys in shipping and another guy in the office just don't get along. There's been bad blood between them for years. The guy from shipping walks into the office and up to the guy he doesn't like, and with a close fist, punches him right in the side of the face, turns around and walks back out to the shipping department and keeps working like nothing happened. After I figure out what the hell happened, the cops come inside him, and I tell him to grab his stuff and that he's fired. He looks at me all confused. He goes on to explain he can't be fired. It's his first offense. He apparently read the new employee manual and thought no matter what he did, first offense was a verbal warning. In his mind, he had one more free punch to give and would still have his job. Story 18. I wasn't a boss, but rather a lead dishwasher at a restaurant shortly after college. I graduated in '07, economy tank, couldn't find work. That's right, folks. 4 years in college to become a lead dish monkey. Anyway, I was in charge of the dishwashers, the salad bar, running supplies to cooks, etc. It was a very busy place, and I expected my guys to be diligent and work with urgency. Because if we didn't keep a decent pace, we'd be there until midnight playing catch-up. One of my guys, we'll call him Little Ducker, was one of the smartest people I have ever met. Sharp as a whip and was just washing dishes to get through community college. He was also one of the biggest addicts I have ever met as well. Not to mention he was cocky as hell. Because Little Ducker was such a smart and cocky guy, he felt he could perform his duties under the influence of whatever he could get his hands on. I'd admit if he smoked before work as long as he got crap done. Occasionally I'd have to get on his case for smoking too much before work, but I liked the dude and didn't want him to get fired. Plus, we would smoke a little bit together after the boss left to making mopping a bit more entertaining. One night, though, Little Ducker took things too far. This Sunnoy strolls in with eyes as red as the devil's banana and was actually moving in slow motion. I told him to get his ass off of scrubbing and work the unload side since it's easier. I took over in the dish pit and was trying to knock out the stack of bus tubs he'd been taking his sweet-ass time. I'm in game time mode because the cooks are running out of 90 feet plates and crap's getting tense in the kitchen. Cooks do not like to have to ask for more plates. Suddenly, Little Ducker looks at me and says, "Hey man, catch!" I turn to him and see a Nina plate flying through the air right at my face like a damn ceramic frisbee. I duck. It hits the wall, shatters, and I lose my crap at him. "What the duck are you doing, Little Ducker? What the duck are you on right now, huh? We're getting slammed and you could have ducked me up with that plate, you idiot." "Dude, chill." I took a substance. "I'm fine, dude." "Damn you, Little Ducker. Get the duck out of my damn dish pit and go the duck home. I'd rather be here till 1 a.m. by myself than deal with your addict horse crap." He leaves, gets himself popped for a dewey on the way home, and is then fired when I told the manager why I sent him home early. I should have called a cab or something, but I was too pissed to think logistically. Years later, we reconnected. He's sober, working as an apprentice in a construction trade, and finally putting his mind to good use. Little Ducker made it. Story 19. After graduating uni, I worked in a soils testing lab until I could find a decent job. As I knew all the tests, I was regularly performing the most complex tests, but would cover for anyone else if they were ill or off-site for any reason. We had one guy, let's call him E. He was a bit of a stoner with a crappy band, but was generally harmless. For some reason, he was in the chem lab doing basic testing. Some days, the time testing required him to be the last out of the building, so he had a key to lock up. One day, E phones in sick, so the call comes down from the office. "Dave, can you take over the chem lab today? Finish off the E's tests and bring the reports up. Don't bother starting anything new." As I'm desperately trying to find my way through the mounds of unsorted part-complete paperwork, I find instructions on how to make GHB, used as a date abuse substance. I think it's a bit odd, but I know he is reasonably dumb, and we don't have most of the chemicals listed. So I put it aside and don't think too much about it. Eventually, after sorting out the paperwork, I carry on with the prepared tests. Whilst rummaging in one of the locked chemical cupboards, I find a bottle I had never noticed before. I certainly wasn't used in any of the tests, but the name rang a bell. Yep, it was one of the chemicals used to make GHB. A quick call upstairs to the office manager and one search of the lab, and it's time to phone the police. He had quite a stockpile of GHB in water sample containers hidden behind legitimate water and soil sample containers. I never saw him again. He appeared in the paper after the court case and claimed it was for personal use, and avoided jail time. The item that really annoyed me was that he had decanted concentrated acid. We had 95% conx HCl and H2SO4 into an unmarked glass water sample bottle, which almost got poured over my unprotected hands. Story 20. I worked in a bank. Not my employee, but colleague. We got robbed. Armed robbery. The guy was getting away, and this colleague of mine ran out, tackled him, beat the crap out of him, made a citizen's arrest, and retrieved all of the stolen funds. He was fired for not following protocol. Story 21. Worked in a latex mattress factory. In my late 20 AS coworker was caught on the weekend. When the factory was closed, in the guard shack, he worked on the loading dock, having sex with an escort by the owner of the company, and didn't get fired. Worked for a jewelry company. Dude in shipping was putting threats. And they were stupid, like, "We're coming for you," the death gang, in some of the packages going out to the stores. Caught him on video. Dude is this creepy albino, really scrawny guy with the largest women I've ever seen and a passel of large kids as a wife. Later that year, same dude is arrested for CP. Story 22. I hired a tech for my PC service shop after months of searching for someone who could keep up with the pace of a very busy shop. On day 3, a regular customer came in, set his newly upgraded PC on the bench and motioned me over. He has just had a new motherboard installed and wanted me to take a look. The new guy had installed his MB with freaking duct tape. I asked him where he even found duct tape in my shop, and he said he brought it from home. I told him, "Grab your tape and the rest if you're crap and go." He responded with, "I am a good technician," and all I could do is shake my head. I still feel bad about how I handled that. firing him on the spot in front of a customer. But goddamn, that was so wrong. I could not even begin to think how he thought that was the right thing to do. Story 23. Wasn't a boss, but I was the IT director. Web development company that had hired a large number of recent college grads as developers. I was going through our file server to see why it was filling up so quickly and came across the home drive of one of our devs, and it was chock full of a few gig of adult vids. But no, not just any adult vids, his own self-made. Story 24. Oilfield trash story here. I wasn't the boss, though. I was in our break room, and one guy was standing up in the middle of the room. We will call this guy Joe. Another guy, let's call him Frank, was sitting down and watching the TV. Frank got irritated and told Joe to move out of the way. Joe ignored Frank and honestly acted as though he didn't even hear him. Frank then said, "Joe, get the duck out of the way." Joe turned around and said, "Do BJ." Frank looked at him and said, "Don't make threats a whole. Whip it out." Joe unzipped his coveralls all the way down, walked over to Frank and put his junk right in his face. Frank jumped up and tackled Joe. Then he started beat Joe, not his exposed junk, either his actual neck. None of the onlookers, myself included, wanted to break them up and risk having old sweaty man meat touch them, so we watched and laughed. Eventually, Joe broke free and went straight to the boss. He was still half naked. Both guys got a week's suspension and never spoke of the fight again. Story 25. Not the craziest story, but here it goes. I am an administrator at a daycare center. The owners hired a girl as a lead teacher. She was former best friends with a child's mother that was enrolled in our center. I tried really hard to not pass judgment. I know how the mother of this child is, so I'm only assuming this new employee was no better. She has 4 kids that go into other rooms while she's teaching her own classroom. Notice she plays on her phone more often than take care of the children under her care. So the owner and I decided to move her to the preschool room to keep her on her toes. Now I catch her pretending to make food in the kitchen. With the door closed, like the kitchen is right next to the room she was teaching in. She straight up closed the door and was gone for over 5 minutes. She said she had to wash out the bottles that were in the sink. She didn't even run water in the sink or anything, or used any cleaning detergents. Anyway, we had a meeting and the owner basically said, "You have a problem. You need to get off your phone." Then one day, a person who monitors centers to make sure they're following rules comes in. It was the perfect opportunity to see how this employee would act. She pretended like she had no phone. And then during the visit, we even posted no cell phone sign. A few days later, she talked to me about how she has deleted her Facebook app numerous times, but always ended up downloading it back because the browser wasn't good enough. She also is the type of person who will drop her life for a guy. She hasn't came into work for almost 4 days. Expected to have more money on her check because she's scheduled 5 days a week for 8-hour shifts. If she doesn't come in, she's in for half the shift. Calls to snap at me about how I'm not doing payroll right. Then decided to say she was doing interviews, orientation, and paperwork for 4 days this week. The owners know her personally, and it's not a corporate place, and aside from her stupid antics, we have it all covered and do everything correctly. She is just off because she's a young single mother with 4 children. Also is involved with a ton of drama. Owner drives to her house to talk to her today. She only came to work to pick up her check, and she didn't even pay her cell phone bill. She asked for an advance on her check because she needed it for that reason. Owner knocks on the door. Guy then approaches the door to tell owner she was at an interview. This was her excuse 4 days ago, and complained how she's really only applied to one job, and it's a family business. She is blowing off work for some stupid random guy that she's admitted to treating better than the other girls he's cheating on her with. Takes her car, decides it's okay to just get rides from others, pays meals for him over herself, etc., and here she is, still employed. I don't understand the reason why they won't let her go. If I had more authority, I would have done it. Seriously, her work ethic is awful, and I feel bad for whoever she works for next. Apparently, she does this often, so when she does eventually get fired, she can get unemployment and is taken care of for however the duration of time it legally can happen. She isn't even doing basic work. She is taking care of children. We can't switch teachers and screw up the whole concept of continuity of care. She also hardly pretends to pay attention until someone important enters the building. She thinks her cell phone is more important. This was an out of order, very sloppy post. I'm sorry. Story 26. I was once a supervisor in a call center. I came out of the bathroom, turned the corner, and saw a phone agent sitting there in his cubicle. He had taken the laces out of one of his shoes and had lit it on fire. He was just sitting there watching it. I said, "This might sound like a joke, considering what's going on here, but you're fired." He laughed. I said, "I'm serious. Get out." He went to HR to complain about me. When he told them what had happened, they escorted him out of the building. Story 27. It wasn't my employee, but I thought it was. I have a radiological instrument calibration laboratory with a few radiological sources of various activities, all of which are dangerous if mishandled. One of our sources and its container is quite old, and we weren't able to find reliable documentation on the inner dimensions of the device. but it had about 3 inches of lead surrounding the source in each direction. We knew the exact activity, but not knowing the distance to the source, we couldn't accurately calculate the expected exposure rates. I had a new, inexperienced technician working in the laboratory, and I was out of state for a conference. During one of the meetings, I subtly checked my phone and found a photo had just been sent to me from my technician. The photo showed the source capsule sitting on a workbench next to the lead container. I knew he didn't have the expertise to remove that capsule himself, and I was honestly worried that he was going to lose a finger or worse. A real possibility if he had held that capsule in his hand. Turns out, he sweet-talked one of the state's most skilled radiological technicians to come over from a prominent university to help determine the inner dimensions of the device. Of course, I only found this out after running out of my meeting and frantically calling the lab. Not to worry. We monitor everyone's exposure in the lab with both active electronic dosimeters and permanent dosimeters of legal record. Nobody was exposed to any detectable amounts of radiation, and everything was reassembled correctly and measured shortly after. Story 28. I was running a retail store and had a kid that decided heroin was a good idea before our monthly store meeting. He's sitting front and center, literally right in front of me, and has a bed case of the nods, to the point where his head finally drooped to the countertop, and there he stayed. I'm getting pissed, but can't stop the store meeting to address a dude with the nods. Everyone that can see him is staring at him, then me, then back to him waiting to see the next move. I was talking about hitting a goal and getting the most penetration we can. He's starting to shift positions, getting cozy in his altered state, and I flip out, slamming my hand on the counter he is resting on and loudly say, "Derp employee, what's going on?" And without missing a beat, he lifts his head, eyes still closed, and blurts out, "Penetration." Everyone, including me, bust out laughing. I think I sent him to the office, finished the store meeting, then had a private meeting with him and my partner at the store. We couldn't send him home because liable. So we had to call his family who he'd been living with when his parents sent him to another state because the same crap happened where he was living. He agreed he should resign his position. He went to rehab again shortly after, but I don't think he's managed to stay clean. Came in a while later trying to pawn some stuff and had to sit on the floor because junk. Hope you're doing well, JS. Story 29. One of my factory workers decided to take his eyes at the table saw he was using. He lost finger. Taking your eyes off an in-motion table saw is one of the craziest things anyone can do. Didn't fire him. But I did learn the intricate workings of workmen's compensation policies that month, and also how much my local hospitals suck. Story 30. Towards the beginning of my career, I worked in large data center and was quickly moving up the ranks and getting new responsibilities every few weeks. In this data center, we used around 300 backup tapes per day, and the tape manufacturer offered a sort of rewards program associated with the number of tapes that you bought. Think of them like airline miles. We bought a couple million in tapes per month, for perspective. My boss calls me into his office and asks that I take over the management of the rewards point that we've been receiving from the manufacturer, as the guy that had been managing it was having issues lately, going through a bad divorce, doing sketchy stuff at work, out sick a lot, etc. We'll call him Rob. We use these rewards points to buy fireproof racks and other work equipment, or so we thought. More on that later. My boss requests the credentials to the rewards account from Rob, tells him that I'm taking over, and Rob sends me the login and password. Rob lets me know we have about $50,000 worth of points in our account. I was having trouble logging into the account via the website, so I called the fulfillment company for assistance. When I called, I explained that I was taking over and needed the account details. The response from the girl on the phone was, "Which of your accounts?" I'm confused because I wasn't told there was more than one account. I asked for all of the credentials for all of these accounts, all 4 accounts. I get the logins and log into each account. The account that I had been told about by Rob did have about $50,000 worth of points in there, but the other accounts, that had much more. Apparently, Rob had been using these other accounts as his personal Best Buy. In total, he had already spent about $1 million worth of points for personal laptops, TVS, watches, workstations, cameras, monitors, stereos, etc. He would have everything shipped to the loading dock and would load his new Lexus SUV full of stuff. I don't know how, but he caught word that I had figured out his gig. I let my boss know, and legal was contacted pretty quickly. Legal interviewed me, and I explained how I figured everything out. About a week later, legal came by and got him to talk. He had been with the company for almost 20 years, so had a pension and whatnot. After he spoke with legal, he left sick for the day and never came back. He went on long-term disability and couldn't be terminated while on leave. We couldn't touch any of his stuff for months. His computer and office sat untouched, per legal's request. A couple weeks after this went down, I saw him in his car while I was out running. He saw me and I saw him. I took off into the nearby woods as I figured he couldn't run me over if I had trees protecting me. Story 31. An employee years ago was running Half-Life and a Quake server in a multi-million-dollar data center that does billions of dollars of transactions daily. He was walked out months later, and he would never have been found out if it weren't for those pesky kids. Story 32. I built a bar in my office, one cabinet for liquor, one big drawer for martini and scotch glasses, as well as all my cocktail-related necessities. I then installed a LED light that changes by remote behind my desk, running up the wall. I was sipping a delightful gin concoction when my boss walked in. He had heard from our director of ops what I had done. I looked him in the eyes and asked if he wanted one finger or two of scotch. He happily obliged. I poured him a drink. He sat down on my couch, and we shot the crap. Story 33. I'm not anyone's boss, but I did help get someone fired. I live in a large condo complex in New England, and a few weeks ago, we got quite a bit of snow. Being a condo complex, we hire a landscaper to plow the parking lots and shovel, salt the walkways. I was home during the blizzard, and I just happened to get a phone call around 10 a.m. Like most people, I like to wander around and do random things while on the phone. This particular time, I just stared out my bedroom window and watched a young employee of the landscaping company plow the parking lot. The kid looked like was in his early or mid-20s. As I'm watching, I noticed that he's getting really close to some of the parked cars with the plow, probably in an attempt to do a good job and not have to make as many passes. Well, during one of his passes, he actually clipped the front of a parked car and moved it over about 2 feet. Since it was so early in the day, and many people were at work or otherwise bunkered down in their apartments, I'm fairly sure that I'm the only one to witness. I wait to see how the kid reacts, and he just drives slowly by the car a couple of times to check for damage. Eventually, he goes back to work plowing, still coming very close to some of the cars, even plowing empty spaces and missing adjacent cars by only inches. After a few minutes and more nervous looks, he drives off. Now the kid is young and probably crap his pants when he hit the car, but he didn't leave a note or get out of the truck to look at the car or anything like that. So I go outside to look at the car he hit, and the bumper is cracked. I immediately called the complex manager to tell her what happened so that she can tell the owner of the car. I described the kid, and she says that she knows who he is and promises to talk to the landscaping company. The next day, I heard back from the complex manager. She tells me that she didn't get around to talking to the landscaping company until the next morning. And by that time, the kid still hadn't fessed up to anything. He had hit and run for sure. According to her, the company assured her that they fired the kid in the hopes of not losing our contract. Story 34. This is kind of the reverse. My boss did something crazy while I was an employee. A client came in, an older, middle-aged dude, owner of a company, who owed us a considerable amount of money for services rendered. He yacked on and on about bullcrap until he got an emergency phone call from his wife. My boss asked again about a check for past due invoices, and this guy pulled out a blank check, laughs, and said, "Here you go." Then he tried to make off with the hard drive we prepared for him, with our work on it. I was working in the next room, and I heard the door to our office slam open, then slam open again a second later. My boss was yelling, "You don't want to do this. This isn't how you want to handle this," or something similar. My coworker and I rushed out the door, down the stairs, still inside, get to the first landing and see my boss pressing on the fire door, keeping the client stuck between the door and the door frame. We were dumbstruck. Here are two full-grown men, businessmen, yelling at each other and bickering while one smushes the other in the door frame. My boss was also trying to grab the hard drive in the client's hand until the client managed to put it in his other hand on the far side of the door. Just a game of keep away between professionals, you know? I didn't know what else to do, so I helped push on the door. This dude's assistant caught up with us. He just left her in our conference room. He ran off without her and had the same dumbstruck reaction. Like, what the heck? My boss said something like, "This is the man you work for. How do you feel about that? He's stealing from us." Eventually, the client started whining, "You're hurting my shoulder. You're hurting me." So my boss eased up, and of course the ducker got loose and bolted down the last hallway to get outside. Kicker was, his assistant had the keys to the car they drove. Her car, actually. My boss and the client stalked each other in circles around this car until his assistant managed to shuffle out, still clueless as to what to do. She unlocked the car, the client threw the hard drive into the back seat and went to get in the front passenger seat. My boss stopped pacing. He blinked, opened the back door on the other side, and grabbed the hard drive. How dumb can you be? Most insane thing that's ever happened to me at work. I don't think it'll ever be topped. We went for a beer afterwards and tried to understand what the hell just happened. We didn't work with that company anymore. Story 35. I worked at a department store that has a lot of issues with the night janitor. The store would get the janitors to a third party, the man who ran the company they hired to clean the floors. For them would go out to the prison on days they were releasing prisoners with a sign offering room and board if they worked for him. He would pay them under the table $40 for a full 8-hour overnight shift. During the day, he would pack them all in his home, sometimes more than 10 people to a room. They were locked in the store overnight without supervision, which caused a lot of issues. A lot of it stealing, but some of it was just crazy. It all started on my first day. I was getting orientation by being given a tour by the manager when the loss prevention manager comes up to her and shows her in open boxes for a bra and some leggings that he found in our fixture room. It turned out that apparently one of the janitors had been pleasuring himself when he was alone. One of the janitors must not have known we had cameras on the floor because we caught him blazing up. Stripping down buck naked used the buffer to buff all the floors in the store. He apparently liked the vibrations from the buffer. Then when he was finished buffing the floor, he finished himself. But the one to beat them all was the guy who we knew was stealing the employees' food from the break room fridge. So our LP set up a camera in the break room to catch him in the act, only to find out he wasn't just stealing our food. He was using the break room sink to urinate in. We had restrooms just outside the break room, and the sink was too high to be convenient. Story 36. I managed a Blockbuster store back in the mid to late 90s, and an employee changed the name in the system on a non-customer account from non-customer to idiot, which printed out on the receipt of everyone that bought something without an account. Yes, I laughed my ass off. Then I gave him a high five and fired him. Story 37. I have a couple. Worked in a retail store, and every night I noticed we'd be short a couple of dollars. A few dollars off wasn't anything to go crazy over because we would recount the money later, and usually any errors were just human error. We had an elderly lady whose department would always come up short a few dollars. She was the sweetest lady, and always so helpful. But when loss prevention launched an investigation, we soon realized what a massive dip crap she was. Stole over $10K over the course of several months. At another company I worked at, I had an employee who would always go to lunch and come back full of energy and raring to go. This is natural, of course. A healthy lunch tends to have that effect on people. What was crazy was that she had a perpetual cold that never left and was prone to mood swing. As time went on, she made many enemies within the company. But things really got interesting when people started to say she was doing substances in the parking lot. I guess enough people complained to her and they tried to substances test her. She refused and was fired. Thought that was the end. Months later, I'm hanging out with some friends and we go meet with some of my other friends at a trap house, basically a place where people go to buy and do substance. And I bump into my former employee. She's laying on the couch with her pants unbuttoned, slightly sagging in a hand. She looks high as balls, and she confirms this seconds later when she weakly lifts her hand up to wave and lets out a little groan that I can only interpret as hello in high as duck language. It's kind of awkward. She doesn't seem to be able to talk much, so I don't stay long. Later that day, I asked one of my friends about it, and he explains that she's an addict, but assures me she's cool people and gives the best BJs when she's not that ducked up. So there's that. Story 38. I worked at a national laboratory in college as a junior scientist. We did all kind of different research, from solid state to in vivo studies. I witnessed a coworker take her tank of zebrafish, Danio rario, a common fish species, down from the rack and pour about a half gallon of bleach in there to kill the fish. For duck's sake! There are protocols in place in the euthanasia of vertebrates. Well, I don't like being a rat, but that's just too far. I reported her to our boss and asked to remain anonymous. She was fired that evening. I'm no bleeding heart, but can you imagine being bleached to death? Story 39. Indeed. So had this guy who worked in the warehouse of my store. We'll call him Mike. He was a squat, rotund, bald gentleman. Mike had an exceedingly annoying habit of quoting Banecat excessively. He was a nice dude. I just wanted to slay him after he constantly did that. Before the store opened, Mike would use the intercom to say, "I peed in it," using his best Bane voice. It was enough to annoy several other people in the warehouse to the point that they complained to myself and another manager. We talked to him and got it across that he had to stop doing that. Mike was rather dissatisfied with that ruling. He brooded upon it, was molded by it. Until one day, one of our older associates was talking to him. Mike perceived it as the associate being a banana, so he got in his face. By older associate, I mean this guy is in his 80s. He's also a millionaire. He's just bored and wants something to do, so he works for us. Anyway, Mike yells at him to duck off and then, in a fit of rage, makes a Herculean toss of the warehouse trash can across the floor. He then comes trundling out of the warehouse and gets in my face, then my GM's face. I told him to take his uniform shirt off. He was no longer employed here. Mike takes exception to this and takes the shirt off and throws it into my GM's face in a quick motion. He then proceeds to try and slam my GM up against a refrigerator. He was bodied off immediately, defeated, and banned from the building. Story 40. We had a mad crafter at this party, equipment rental company. Random people would find human turds in their items. Inside cassette tapes cases, radios, hard hats, pockets of jackets. The guy was remarkably accurate. Here's the M. Night Shyamalan twist. It was the boss. He'd poo in your items when he was mad at you. Story 41. I used to run a convenience store years ago. It was part of a chain, and all of the security cameras were available for corporate to access online so they could check on the stores from anywhere. Anyway, HR calls me one day and tells me that they caught my graveyard shift guy pleasure himself in the store. Not like in the office or somewhere hidden from view. Nope, just out there in the middle of the store at 3 a.m. when no one was around. I mean, people could have walked by or walked in and seen him pulling his pud. Who knows how many times he did that before someone in corporate caught it. Anyway, so we had to call him into the main office to fire him, of course, and that crap was totally awkward. We didn't really have a conversation so much as we just had him read and sign a document that described in detail what he was being fired for. I still see that guy around occasionally, and it's weird. And now that I think about it, I remember that at least one other guy got fired at another store for the exact same thing. Story 42. Woodshop. Our somewhat infamous drunken laborer got an escort to do bija him in the shop bathroom. Other employees proceeded to screw the door shut. Dude screamed and eventually kicked out the bottom panel and crawled out. Ho followed. No firing. Nothing but insanity and laughter. Gotta loves New Orleans. Story 43. I own a bar in Nevada, so we have slot machines. One evening, about 8 months ago, my female bartender was tending bar. Towards the end of the night, some patrons walked in and ordered some drinks. Being the end of the night, she and these 3 men are the only ones in the bar. After making small talk with the patrons for a while, she leaves to use the restroom. Now for some context on my employee. We've known each other since 7th grade. She's about 5 feet 5 inches, maybe 120 pounds. Never been in a fight the whole time I've known her. Polite, pretty, and outgoing. So in a nutshell, she's a great bartender, but not in the least bit intimidating at all. When she returns from the restrooms, she sees one of the men trying to pry open one of our slot machines with a screwdriver. She immediately picks up the nearest bar stool and tries to hit the guy with it. The guy gets out of the way, and she starts yelling at all of them to get the duck out, still wielding the bar stool. She chases all 3 grown men out of the bar, each of which was basically twice her size, and locks the doors behind them. She called me after this all goes down and tells me what had happened. I was asleep at the time and told her I was on my way and not to go outside. She tells me, don't bother, those idiots won't be back and I'm already driving home. So hell no, I didn't fire her. In fact, I did the opposite. I gave her a raise and gave her more shifts. That girl is a badass.